All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. So, yes, today's topic is this question of can machines think? Uh, a question that has been gaining prominence in the public sphere, especially in the last few years, after ChatGPT was released to the public and so on. But it's actually a much, much older question, of course, when people started thinking about artificial intelligence for the first time in the beginning of the first few decades of the 20th century. And this became the sort of debate around this heated up later on in the 1960s and 70s, what is today sometimes called the good old-fashioned AI and artificial systems. But even before that, even before anybody had thought of computers, people have at least somehow dealt with this question in various ways, thought about who can machines think, and the sort of analogous question of is the human mind a machine, and so on, right? So what I want to do is that we have an hour, maybe for 40 minutes. I want to give you a brief, slightly opinionated overview of uh, this question, overview of the problem of can machines think, and a sort of an answer to this question, or at least even if not an answer to the question of what I think about the answer. All right. So even in this 40 minutes, I think there might be portions where I might invite some of the audience to contribute and discuss. And at the end of the 45 minutes, we'll have a discussion. I hope that sounds fine, Nele. I think the format. All right. Okay. So let's sort of jump into the question. Can machines think? Maybe just to begin with, is there anybody in the audience who very seriously thinks that machines can think? Anybody? Maybe you want to raise your hands, or you could go ahead, unmute yourself, and even share what you think. Anybody at all?
Participants, you can use the chat box, which might be enabled.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody in the audience who thinks that today there is a machine which can think? Maybe the laptop, or maybe some advanced computer, or maybe, I don't know, any other machine at all. Anybody here who thinks that? Yes, we have some responses. Mr. Abhishek is saying yes, as is Mr. Santosh. And Rohit says, I believe it can simulate the ability to think closely, but not the inherent ability of thinking itself. Hmm. All right. So at least Rohit here seems to be thinking that, or at least seems to opine that even if it cannot do actual thinking, it can simulate thinking. Okay, something like halfway to thinking. But Santosh, do you want to say a little bit more? Do you think what kind of systems? I assume computers. Do you think that they can actually think today? All right. Yes. So, okay, I'm sort of asking these questions to get you all to sort of dig into your intuitions themselves to see if what we think. Do you think that the capacity of thinking is something we can attribute to machines, to non-humans, to non-animals, to non, if I may call it, non-biological systems? And it seems that at least, even if we are not sure, we are at least willing to sort of entertain the notion that machines can think. Santosh says maybe yes, they can think, but not to the extent of humans, right? But all logical thinking is possible, especially when it's loaded with data, as almost all our computers and even mobile phones these days are, right? So, yes, that's the question that I'm asking. Can machines think? And that's the question that people very seriously, very serious scholars, computer scientists, uh, data scientists, neuroscientists, and importantly, philosophers also ask, right? So, can machines think? And if you were to believe the hype around around artificial intelligence, especially since we have had large language models after ChatGPT became public, it seems that a lot of very influential people, scientists, businessmen, entrepreneurs, either think that, already we have really artificially generally intelligent systems, what is called AGI, artificial general intelligence, or at least in the very near future in our life, I mean, forget our lifetimes, in the next decade or so, people expect that we might have artificial general intelligence or something like that. So surely, if we have artificial general intelligence, or AGI, is to say a artificial intelligence system which is not just able to fulfill certain tasks, like play a game, or not just able to do certain things like robotic systems in an industrial industry might do, but they are generally intelligent in the way that human beings are, right? I mean, we are good at doing various things, not just one thing. We can play games well, we can write well, we can sing well, we can reason well, we can navigate a physical environment well, and so on, right? So that's the kind of thing that if an artificial intelligence system is able to do, you would say, yes, we have arrived at AGI. And that has been sort of what might be considered the holy grail of artificial intelligence, even back then in the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s, right? AGI, in fact, was a term that was coined back then. So yes, if we were to believe the hype, it seems like already we have AGI systems. Some people might say even LLMs. LLMs are large language models like ChatGPT or Google Gemini and so on are already, have achieved AGI, or at least in the near future. We have the CEO of OpenAI, Mr. Sam Altman, who's predicting that it could arrive before 2030, and this prediction is not very old, just a few months ago. Or there are some who are already willing to go beyond AGI and say that LLMs might already be conscious. We'll get to what I mean by conscious, right? And if you've been sort of following the news, you would know that a few years ago, there was a newsworthy item where there was a software engineer at Google called Blake Lemoine, who sort of raised a memo internally, and I think also made it public, that he was now feeling that his AI chatbot is now sentient. Again, a term which is very similar to conscious and intelligent, right? And then he was fired, and that became a big news as to people are telling that Google is trying to sort of suppress the news of AI achieving sentience and so on, right? But so there is a lot of hype around, can gain the kind of intelligence that human beings have, right? AGI, or even more, can they be conscious? It's a question that has always sort of interested computer scientists and philosophers, but has become much, much more prominent, has sort of gained center stage in the last few years. All right. And this question is not just something that's important, of interest to us for business or for as an intellectual exercise, but it seems that an artificial intelligence system, if it were to become conscious or become intelligent, would have varied kind of influence, both ethical and economic. On the one hand, people start thinking that we assume that other humans are conscious and many other animals are conscious, and we then treat them as moral beings. That is, you think that I need to act morally to another human, I need to act morally to another animal, right? Because they are intelligent, they are sentient, or they are conscious, right? We often think that, oh, if this happened to me, I would feel pain, so I should make sure I don't behave that way to another human, right? Now, if artificial intelligence systems were to become conscious, we need to be thinking about their welfare as well, right? And this is something that's again become a prominent point of debate. For example, you have not just scientists, you have whole research organization set up just to think about AI welfare, right? And so on. And then there are prominent newspapers and magazines which are discussing this, right? Because if AI has become conscious, then we need to start thinking about their welfare and so on, right? Uh, yes, there is somebody who's asking about is this about PPE? How is philosophy important for understanding AI? We will get to that, Swami Rajat. So just give me some moment. I think the conclusion of the talk will be heading towards that. Swati Ranjan. Yes. Right. On the other hand, people are also worried that if we achieve something like AGI or artificial consciousness, what is going to be the economic impact on this if we now have machines to do the kind of things that we want humans to do now, including coding or including even research? Does it mean that humans, or a large section of human beings, are going to be left without jobs? and very prominent people, including the physics Nobel laureate, Professor Jeffrey Hinton, who sort of considered the godfather of this new wave of artificial intelligence, has sort of warned people about, right? So this shows us that this question of can machines think is not just very interesting. It helps us learn more about what do we do when we think, but also is a very immediate, in some sense, an immediate ethical, moral, political, and economic question, right? Because if they are conscious, then we need to think about their welfare. And what does it do for the welfare of human beings? Are we going to lose jobs? So this is part of the reason why these questions have become urgent. But as a philosopher, and if you want to take a philosophical look at this, what we need to do is also step back a little and think about what does it actually mean to think, right? I mean, we want to answer this question, can machines think? And if they can, there are a lot of other things that we need to be worried about. But what are we even asking? What does it mean when we ask that can machines think? I want you all to maybe take a moment and delve into this question. What does it mean to think at all? Can you all take a maybe half a minute and maybe quickly, if you have a notebook or otherwise somewhere, note down what does it mean to think? What do you do when you're thinking? All right, maybe just 20 seconds to 30 seconds, and then I'll get back to you all. All right, quickly, can maybe some of you tell me what does it mean to think? When you're thinking about anything at all, what are you doing? Can you all maybe quickly type down your responses? What do you do when you're thinking? Yes. Any responses? What do you do when you think? Or what does it mean to think? We all know what it means to run or digest food, or we all know what it means to cook various activities, right? But what does it mean to think? Rohit says it's to question, or in the very bad, trying to recognize patterns. Yes, you're right. I mean, when we are thinking, we are asking questions. We also recognize patterns. And then Swati Ranjit says, when we are thinking, we are conscious and we are aware. Very good. You're making my job a little easier, but we'll get to that. Then Santosh says, we analyze data and recall from memories to arrive at decisions based on our beliefs. Very good. We do all of this when we are thinking, right? Sometimes people say uh, we logically analyze data, we cognize the world, take some inputs, process it, and do other things when we think, right? Which is all right. But does that, I mean, it seems like we are in all these responses, we are at least partly missing one important aspect, which is what sort of I want to point you all to. Take a moment to read this sentence. The boy, the man, the girl saw, chased, fled. All right. Are you all able to immediately understand what this sentence means? The boy, the man, the girl saw, chased, fled. What does this sentence mean? Are you all able to immediately understand that? Okay, at least the first time I read this sentence, or even now, I think I am not quite sure I understand what this sentence means, though I can understand parts of the sentence. Yes, Santosh says is a little confused. I agree. I'm more than a little confused. All right. But what about this sentence? It's the same words, right? But can you understand this sentence now? The boy who was chased by the man that the girl saw fled. Yes? I mean, I can understand the second sentence now, and I hope you all can, right? It's the same words if you see, just that I've added a few punctuation marks, a couple of commas here and there. And now you understand that the sentence means that, okay, the boy who somebody, another man saw was chasing a girl. That boy fled away. He went away, right? We all understand that in the first sentence, we couldn't really make the meaning. We couldn't understand what it means. Whereas in the second one, we could understand what it means, right? So that distinction is clear. I think everybody agrees that the first sentence is perhaps not, I mean, most people would not understand it, whereas the second sentence, most people will understand it, right? That's clear. But to me and to a lot of others, the more important question is the first sentence which you did not understand and the second sentence which you did understand, did the two of them feel different to you from the inside in some sense? The two sentences look different clearly, right? Because of the commas. The second sentence seems a little longer than the first one because of the commas and the punctuation marks. And then now you're all telling me, I assume, that the second sentence is something you can understand, whereas the first one is something you cannot understand. But my question is, did the two feel different to you in understanding the second sentence, whereas the first sentence you could not understand? Was there a feeling that was associated with the understanding? That's the question I'm asking. Can you all maybe take a moment to sort of reflect on that? Was there some way you felt when you understood the question? And was that feeling missing when you read the first sentence? So that's the question I'm asking you to sort of take a moment to think. And Mayuri says, yes, that she did feel different after she understood the second sentence. Good. So did I, right? I do think that it feels some way to understand something. Whereas when you just look at the first sentence, it feels some way for me to look at the sentence, but that feeling does not include that feeling of understanding. I mean, of course, there are many such examples that I could draw your attention to. Think about what happens when you listen to somebody speaking in a language you don't know, say Swahili, right? Or various or some other language. I don't know Bengali. So when I listen to somebody, I can, it feels some way for me to listen to them, right? The sound of hearing the sound. Whereas if I were to understand Bengali and listen to them, along with that feeling of listening to those words, I think I have another feeling which I associate with understanding. I have this feeling of understanding, right? So, yes, let's get back to the question. What does it mean to think? Of course, to think, it means we are analyzing data, we are drawing from our various other cognitive functions such as memory, perception, information processing, and whatnot. But encompassing all of this, some might say, in some sense, integrating all of this, is that there is a feeling associated with thinking. It feels some way to understand certain things, right? Just like how for me, it feels some way to understand the words that are being spoken. It felt some way for me to understand the second sentence, whereas that feeling was missing in the first sentence, right? So, what I want to sort of point out or take away from this is that to think is to have a certain kind of feeling, right? Or at least I'm putting forward this hypothesis to you that to think is to have a certain kind of feeling. Now, this we are sort of entering extremely contentious territory. And to sort of give you an example of this, I have got the title of two very influential research papers in philosophy of mind, the area that I work, where people are at loggerheads. On the one hand, there are a set of people who think that, yes, there is a feeling associated with thinking and understanding. Or when I think that today is Friday, it feels some way for me to think that today is Friday. Right? That's on the left. On the other hand, there are others who say, no, 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 there is nothing. There is no feeling at all associated with thinking. Right? For example, Professor Karutas would deny that there is a difference in feeling between when I read the first sentence and the second sentence. He would not deny that there is a difference in cognition. Of course, in the second sentence, I understand the meaning, Whereas he would say, but that difference is not one of feeling, right? So this is a very, very contentious sort of point. But at least what I want to present to you all is that it is very likely contestable, arguable, but it is at least possible that to think is to have a certain kind of feeling. Just like how when I smell a rose, I get a certain feeling associated with smell, right? That way, to think anything and to understand anything is to have a certain kind of feeling, something you feel on the inside. Just like how when you feel pain, you feel something on the inside. You can't take your pain out and show it to others, right? Just like how I can show you my hand, I can show you my brain. I mean, I can't, but I mean, there are no advanced techniques to sort of map your brain and things like that and find an image of your brain. But if somebody were to ask me, why don't you take me your pain and show it? I can't like take and say, hey, this is my pain, right? So that way, a lot of people think that to think, that process of thinking or that phenomena of thinking is something like that you feel on the inside. That is subjective. That is not something that you can show. On the other hand, there are people who think, no, 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 that's not thinking at all, right? But I want to take the first option seriously. Or in other words, some might say thinking, as I think Swati herself sort of also pointed out, to think is to have a conscious experience. That is, when I understood that sentence, I had a conscious experience of understanding, right? When I think about the lunch that I ate, I have a conscious experience of thinking that. And that was that conscious experience which was missing when I was reading the first sentence, right? So somebody would say, or I would say that the difference between my understanding the second sentence and the first sentence is that there was an additional feeling that I had, a conscious experience of understanding, which really constitutes my understanding the second sentence, right? So this then leads us to the question, what does it at all mean to have a conscious experience, correct? Let's sort of recall the examples that I just gave you a while ago. When I look at a red fruit, say a red watermelon, it feels some way for me to look at that color red, right? It feels some way for me to look at the color red. Similarly, when I listen to a bird chirp, say a Tickle's blue flycatcher, it feels some way for me to listen to the bird's song. Similarly, when I smell a flower, a champaka flower, it feels some way, the sweetness of its fragrance feels some way for me. And that's very, very subjective, right? If somebody were to ask me, can you show me how the flower smells to you? I would take the flower and show it to them. But then they can immediately say, no, 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 I can smell the flower, but I am not interested in how the flower feels for me. I want to know how the flower smells to you. Then what do I then show them? Can I, in some sense, like how I show them my hand, can I take my smell experience, my conscious experience of smell and show them? No, neither can I when I feel pain when somebody, pierces me with a syringe. So that it seems like our mental life is constituted by this phenomena called consciousness, which is in its very being subjective. Its very existence is for me, right? It's not objective. Others can't observe my feeling. Others can observe the behavior I exhibit when I feel something. For example, when I smell the flower, I am lost in its fragrance. So people can see me being lost, but they can't really see or observe my experience of smelling the flower, right? So that's consciousness. And it seems like thinking also has an associated feel. Different thoughts have different associated feels, just like how different colors feel different way to us. It seems like different thoughts and different understanding have different way they feel to us, right? So then, to answer the question of can machines think, we need to answer the question, do machines have the capacity for this thing called consciousness? That is, to know a machine, can I know everything about it just by looking at it, by observing it, by studying it objectively? Or is there something more to machines, right? Just like how there is something more, it seems, to my mental life, right? My experience of pain, my experience of understanding, my thoughts. So that's really what the question of can machine think sort of ultimately, not completely, but at least importantly reduces to. But this question of what is consciousness, or more sort of interestingly, we think our world is physical, right? We have a world of black holes and uh, rocks and mountains and trees and benches and tables and human bodies and biological systems. We think our world is entirely physical, right? And we normally think anything that is physical is objective. That is, it exists out there for everybody to observe, even if not through our immediate senses. We can have advanced observational techniques and instruments to observe them, right? Now you can have an electron microscope and whatnot, and you have various, I don't know, various advanced astronomical devices to detect what happened a few million years ago or a few light years away and things like that, right? I mean, you have all these things and you can observe those phenomena. They are out there. But consciousness, as we just saw, seems to be the kind of thing that is not out there, but in here, whatever we are, right? And that's the reason why I'm not able to show you what my pain is. And you're not able to show me what your understanding is, what your thought is, what your thinking process is. You have to use language and things like that, right? So, this question of what is consciousness in a physical world is deeply problematic to say the least. And this is not a recent problem at all. This has been at the heart of philosophical debates for at least a few thousands of years, right? At the root of human civilization, when people first started coming up with knowledge systems, and first at the origin of human knowledge, and some would say with philosophy itself, people have started thinking about this question: what is this thing? What is our mind in this physical world? What is this inner universe as opposed to the outer world that we see, right? And this, at least in contemporary philosophy of mind, has come to be known as the hard problem of consciousness. How can there be such subjective phenomena, such inner worlds in a physical world? And this problem, the philosopher David Chalmers famously called, was a hard problem. And when he says hard, he doesn't mean it the same way when I say that calculus is hard or economics is hard or, running 100 meters within 12 seconds is hard or running a marathon is hard. Yeah, they are all really hard, but it seems like we at least know what we need to do if you want to solve those problems, right? You know that if you want to run a marathon, you need to train a particular way, you need to do various things and so on. And if you want to learn how to build a computer, you go join a program and then do one, you need to set up factory and so on. On the other hand, to understand how there can be consciousness, subjective phenomena in an objective world, it seems that scientists and philosophers are not even sure how we need to go about answering this question, right? The evolutionary biologist, the biologist Thomas Huxley, very sort of succinctly sort of captured the bewilderment that people feel when we think about this question of consciousness. He said that how is it that anything so remarkable as a state of consciousness comes about as the results of irritating nervous tissues? Because that's what we all think, right? We all think that something happens in our brain, our neurons and so on, something they fire and there is some action potential and so on. And suddenly we have this inner lives. To him, this seemed as bewildering as the appearance of the genie or the jinn when Aladdin rubs the lamp. Suddenly there is a lamp and then you rub it and something magical comes out of it, right? A genie. I'm sure you've all seen Aladdin, Disney's Aladdin, and so on. And to him, the emergence of consciousness seems to be something like that. The emergence of subjective consciousness, subjective experience in an objective world, in a world of objects, that is to say, like rocks and human bodies and animal bodies and plants and black holes and whatnot. It seems utterly mysterious, and it is in some sense still quite mysterious, right? And that's why it has now come to be recognized as a hard problem. Yes, but that does not mean that people have not tried giving various kinds of solutions, not quite scientific solutions, but various kinds of philosophical solutions of various kinds. And you might be surprised to know at the kind of variety of responses that people across centuries and cultures have had for this. Just a sample of that. Some think that consciousness is a brain process, right? Exactly the kind of thing that Thomas Huxley, and a lot of us find quite bewildering. On the other hand, especially in the last couple of decades, there is this new theory of consciousness called integrated information theory, which is consciousness is integrated information. On the other hand, especially during the first wave of artificial intelligence and things like that, a lot of cognitive scientists, in fact, the whole paradigm of cognitive science sort of works on the assumption that our consciousness and our conscious mind is like software to the brain's hardware. Just like how a hardware implements software, they say, okay, our brain implements this logical functions called the mind or the conscious mind. And all of these are heavily contested. I mean, this is just to give you an idea of the kind of the wide variety of views. On the other hand, some people say that consciousness is just an illusion. We all think we are conscious in a particular way. We all think that we have this subjective experience, which is somehow not objective, but that really is an illusion, right? At the other extreme, there are those, and I myself am quite sympathetic to this view, is that consciousness or something like human consciousness, not quite human consciousness, but something like that is not just limited to humans and animals, but in some sense, everything is conscious, has something like consciousness, right? And that too is sort of a view that has sort of seeing a revival in contemporary philosophy. And in fact, there are some scientists. In fact, this article, the blurb from which I've got, was written by a very, very famous neuroscientist, right? On the other hand, there is also the view called idealism, which says, see, we all think we know what physical things are, and then we think consciousness is the problem. But actually, it's the other way around. We know what consciousness is. The only thing we don't know is actually, is there something other than consciousness? We seem to think there is a world outside, but is there something like that? And a lot of mystical and religious traditions, including Indian philosophical traditions, sort of propound such a view. But again, I'm not getting into this. This is just to give you an idea of the kind of responses that the problem of consciousness evokes, which is also a testament to the kind of, I mean, these are all very serious options that are published in the best and the most leading journals of philosophy and consciousness studies and science and so on, right? Uh, but yes, so this is to give you an idea as to why this problem is really hard, you know. It is because we simply don't be able to reconcile the existence of subjective experiences such as feelings and thoughts in an objective world, in a world that we can observe, right? So, given all of this, and this is something that, I mean, a research that has come out just in the last 10 days, taking a survey of all of this, a philosopher of science and philosopher of mind at the University of Cambridge, sort of very succinctly uh, summarized something that a lot of people, including I think myself, share. I mean, this is not to say there is anything like a consensus that the only thing we can say about whether artificial systems today are conscious or can be conscious in the future is to remain agnostic. That is, his sort of argument, and you can read the abstract of that research there, is to say that, see, we really don't understand how consciousness can fit into this physical world. So, without knowing that fundamental question, we simply cannot answer the question of whether artificial systems can be conscious, right? Think about other question. To know whether my water bottle does digestion, I can say for sure that it does not do digestion. And part of the reason why I'm able to say that is that I know what digestion is, right? I mean, I may not know it personally, but if I go take up a textbook in human physiology and biology, it'll tell me what digestion is, and I can quickly find out that this bottle does not implement digestion. On the other hand, if we do not have an idea as to how we are conscious or what kind of systems can be conscious or what kind of physical systems can at all be conscious, it seems the best answer to the question of whether our machines conscious is to at least remain agnostic. And Professor Tom McClelland and a lot of others seem to think that not only do we have to remain agnostic now, it seems like we will have to remain agnostic forever. Maybe a little pessimistic, but yes, that is a view that a lot of people very seriously consider. So, to summarize, to know if machines can really think, the question that we began with, we need to know if machines today are or can be conscious, right? And that, as we saw, is a really, really hard problem. So, yes, while a lot of people can drum up the hype and say that we have artificially intelligence systems which are conscious, which have achieved the kind of intelligence that we have, if we believe that our intelligence is based on our capacity to understand, and if understanding is a conscious experience, it feels some way to for us to understand anything at all, then unless we are able to say what consciousness is, we cannot really answer the question if machines can really think. So, to all those of you who are sort of expecting a categorical response to this question, I am sorry, but hey, it seems like the best of the minds cannot answer in the world cannot answer this question, and some of them seem to be thinking that we may never be able to answer this question with any level of confidence, right? So, I think this sort of problem and this question of the mind and the body, or the conscious mind and the physical body, and how do we fit the two of them together, has been, as I said, a perennial philosophical question in some sense, right? I mean, right from the birth of philosophy in whichever tradition, ancient Greece, India, China, African traditions, and so on, the place of the human mind and human beings itself sort of takes central position in philosophy. And philosophy in general asks such fundamental question, right? If people were going around telling, hey, can machines think or do other things, the job of philosophy and philosophers is ask this question, hey, wait a minute, what do you even mean when you say think? What does it mean for us to think, right? And by design, it seems to be that philosophy deals with such questions which are slightly ambiguous, or what one might call edgy. If you know really well how to answer a question, that becomes a discipline on its own. I mean, in some sense, a lot of the disciplines that we know today, linguistics or even natural sciences, were birthed this way from philosophy, right? So you can ask philosophical questions about almost anything, right? Uh, and so in Sai University, philosophy is part of two programs. You have the politics, philosophy, and economics major, and the philosophy minor, which anybody doing can take a philosophy minor. So the politics, philosophy, and economics, I mean, as you can see, is a combination of three disciplines. And philosophy, at least in getting trained in philosophy, you will learn to ask such fundamental questions that concerns politics and economics, including, for example, right? If, as an economist, you want to understand what does AI mean for the future of jobs, right? And if you see all the hype, the kind of headlines that I showed you, uh, is AI really going to replace humans in all activities? To have a perspective on that, you need to really have a perspective on the philosophical question of, can machines think, right? Or to do the kind of jobs that we want machines to do, is thinking at all required, right? To put words together the way that LLMs and ChatGPT does, is thinking at all required, right? Or on the other hand, in the sphere of politics, do you want to give rights to things such as computers? Tomorrow, do we need to think twice about switching off the computer because we think it's conscious? I mean, I don't think so, but right, you see that those have serious implications for questions of politics. So, yes, PPE as a program, by training you in this discipline called philosophy, trains you to ask and think systematically about such fundamental and, if I may say, edgy questions. So thank you all. We are now open for discussion. Maybe let me see if there are any questions that people have already put up. In the Q&A first, Swati Ranjita, since this talk is under politics, philosophy, and economics, why is philosophy important for understanding AI? I hope to have answered this question, but if I can tell you a little bit more, even if you're not someone who wants to pursue uh, philosophy and become an academic philosopher, or even if you're not particularly interested in AI, I think the tools that philosophy gets, I mean, equips one with, can help you think about more fundamental questions, like I hope to have shown. I mean, some of the other questions about AI really is okay. I mean, the ethics of AI. For example, uh, should AI be allowed to, say, write research papers or take decisions on things such as, should a loan be granted, right? How do you think about this question? And philosophy gives you some fundamental principles and tools and concepts to think about this. For example, somebody might say, only those people who are authors can write research papers, right? Or only those people who are able to explain to the others why they took a decision should be allowed to take important decisions, such as can a loan be sanctioned. So now it seems like a lot of AI, the decisions it takes are not transparent or what you call opaque. So given that, if an AI system, even if it is not intelligent, even if it is not conscious, as long as it's not able to explain to us, should we be allowing it to take important decisions, right? So at least philosophy gives you such ethical frameworks and various other things to do with not just AI, but politics and economy and life in general, as they would say. So yes, anonymous attendee has asked, as AI gets smarter, will it eventually be able to make moral or ethical decisions like a person can? Well, is it making moral and ethical decisions already? It seems like you go and ask a question to ChatGPT, it will give you an answer to an ethical question. Now, has it thought ethically, or is it a decision that it has taken as opposed to merely producing text which communicates to us an ethical view is a further question. And it seems to me, if you were to ask me, I would say no. But if you were to ask me if I'm confident that AI can never take an ethical decision like humans do, I would say I don't know enough to actually say that. And some, as we just saw, might say we will never be able to know. But if you want to ask me today, I would say that it can help us taking ethical decisions by it can aid us in our thinking, but by itself, can it be a decision maker? I would say no, because I would say I'm not sure if AIs can really understand the way that human persons can. That's because I'm not sure if AI have this inner lives or inner conscious experiences at all. All right. Uh, there's another Mayuri first asked, do you think machines will ever be truly creative, like being able to invent a new style of art or music on their own? Again, this is a very, very interesting question. Uh, it seems like already AI able to convince a lot of human beings, including perhaps us, if we were to just show that they are being creative, right, in producing music, in producing articles. I see a lot of essays submitted by students which are clearly generated by GPT, but they are not very creative. I'm able to sort of immediately identify that they are using GPT and so on. Just kidding. Most students don't. But whether they are truly creative, I don't know, right? Because I mean, as a philosopher, I'll have to again step back and ask, what does it mean to be truly creative? Are human beings being truly creative all the time? I don't know. Maybe some would say yes, and that's the kind of creativity that that machines might never have. Perhaps because they may not have this capacity to have feelings, conscious experiences, and surely our conscious experiences have something to do with our creative responses to situations, right? Rohit Gopi says, sorry for going a bit off topic, but if one definition of thinking is having conscious experience, then is nature conscious? Nature can experience, understand life, and recognize patterns and take required actions. Because I feel this question can make us understand how thinking can be applied to non life experiences. This is a great question, Rohit. And in fact, this is at a question also at the center of philosophy of biology and a lot of what I think evolutionary biologists also think about. But I don't know. When you say can nature experience, I would say, okay, we are all part of nature, right? We are human beings, are all natural beings. If we assume we are natural beings, and as are the cats and dogs, at least some natural entities, some part of nature can experience. But can all natural entities experience? Does the mountain, which is natural, can it experience? I don't know. But perhaps you have in mind the whole mechanism, natural mechanisms through which intelligent life emerges, right? Is the process of evolution intelligent, or is there thinking involved? Most people would say no, evolution is in some sense uh, it's sort of regulated by this mechanism of random selection, right? So there are random mutations, and those who survive is what we call selection. in some sense. So in some sense, evolution is not a intelligent process that's based on thinking. So I'm not sure if nature as such can be conscious as opposed to, or most people would accept that nature is conscious as opposed to there are some natural entities, you, me, other human beings, perhaps various other animals, perhaps plants that are conscious and that can think, right? I mean, in fact, if you see, actually, a lot of scientific study of animals also do not want to attribute things, I mean, cognitive capacities such as thinking to animals. I mean, till a few decades ago, nobody would say an animal, even a monkey, thought and did an action, at least a scientific study. It's only in the last few decades that people are able to, or scientists are willing to attribute mental states such as thinking to animals. Earlier, they would just explain behavior in terms of other behavior rather than internal states such as thoughts and thinking. Yes, other questions or any other point? I mean, please feel free to raise any questions or if you felt anything I said was completely wrong or I was surely mistaken in saying something, please go ahead and say that.
Sir, there is one question
Yeah.
from Akruda. So, what subject should I focus on at college if I want to study the intersection of human minds and AI?
Is this okay?
Q&A. Yeah.
Thanks, Akrit. I am not able to see that question, I think. Or
In the Q&A section, sir.
yeah, in the Q&A answer, no, open. Okay, what subject should I focus on in college if I want to study the intersection of human minds and artificial intelligence? Thanks, Akrita. Of course, I mean, you need to study artificial intelligence, for which I think there are, I mean, the curriculum to study computer systems and so on, right? But, I mean, there are various disciplines which study these things, like the human mind and behavior is, of course, the subject of study in psychology. And but I would say, I mean, as someone who is very keenly interested in minds, the nature of minds and the nature of artificial minds as well, I would say philosophy has a very, very important, a central role in some sense to also to help people understand these questions by asking these very foundational questions like what does it even mean to be intelligent or have a mind, right? And there are, I mean, philosophers of mind, that is the central question that the subdiscipline called philosophy of mind focuses on. And historically, if you see a lot of, I mean, people, I mean, there has been a lot of cross pollination of ideas and discussion between computer scientists working in AI and philosophers of mind and cognitive scientists and neuroscientists and so on. So, this whole field of trying to understand intelligence, consciousness is a very, very interdisciplinary field, right? So, these are some disciplines that I would encourage you to pursue if you want to study and know more about artificial intelligence and human minds, right? So AI, computer science, and the allied disciplines that come with it, philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and so on. Yes, others, any other questions? Kruta. Other questions, thoughts, comments?
Sir, can I take philosophy alone as a minor along with AI major at SaiU?
Yes, you can do that. You can take a philosophy minor with any of the other majors that we offer, either in the School of Arts and Sciences, the School of Computing and Data Sciences, or any of the schools. I think it's only the students of law who cannot take a minor officially, though they can attend classes and listen to lectures otherwise. So yes, you can take a AI major or a computer science major along with a philosophy minor.
Thank you, sir. So one is from Ash. So why is it that humans find sentences like the boy, the man, the girl saw chased fled so hard to process, but machines find them easy? Does that mean machines think better than us?
Hmm. Hello, Harsh. I'm not sure even if machines can would actually, if I were to go back to that sentence, where is this? Yeah, this one, right? If I just fed this sentence, I'm not sure even if a machine would be able to immediately process it, right? So what it might do is it might use its algorithms and whatever to predict that it is very likely that there should have been commas there, and probably give you a response based on that understanding. I mean, they don't understand, but they saw based on that assumption, right? So computers are definitely, I mean, very, very quick in information processing. So they'll be able to do that. So given some time, I think even human beings would be able to have, probably even you and I would have guessed that that's probably where the comma should have been placed, right? We might not process the information as fast, but my point is different. In some sense, we may slowly but eventually get to something called an understanding because we have the capacity for consciousness. On the other hand, even if the computer is able to quickly process the information, it's not clear and give an output to us like an LLM would. It's not clear if the computer would have really understood, because understanding is not just about the output, right? Understanding, as we saw, it seems to me, is also about the internal state, the feeling associated with understanding. Thanks, Ash, for that. Others?
Thank you, sir. So participants, if there are any more questions, you can put it in Q&A or chat box. Sir will be happy to answer that. And if you're an applicant, if you're applicants, probably kindly get in touch with our counselors. Even if you feel like you want to get in touch with our faculty, they will help you out. Yeah. Any more questions? I think okay.
Right. No other questions or comments or anything else if you want to share your views? What skill sets philosophy will be does one help? Uh, See, philosophy, as I said, I mean, helps. I mean, apart. I mean, it helps you. And it molds our thinking in a particular way. I mean, as do every discipline, right? In disciplines can also be understood as ways of understanding, and philosophy helps you understand certain things by asking certain kinds of questions, which can be typically called foundational questions, right? Uh, for example, I mean, how will philosophy help an economist? Is by asking questions about, when economists study the economy, what is it that they are studying, for example, right? I mean, that's a very central question in philosophy of economics, of any other discipline, really. The philosophy of science really asks this question about various sciences. So it helps you develop the skill or competence to ask certain kinds of questions. That is, of course, one. Apart from that, at the center of philosophy are two very, very, I would say, important skills that I think is at the heart of any kind of liberal education, which is, number one, it helps you to think critically in some sense. When I say think critically, it helps people reflect on their own thinking, the kinds of reasoning that they involve in, to be little better with their reflective thinkers. Of course, we have a foundation course called critical thinking, where we are taught basics of logic and reasoning, but philosophy as a discipline is very self-reflective, right? And people who are trained in philosophy, are taking a philosophy course, also are trained to be self-reflective, really pay attention to the kind of reasoning that they do, right? Which eventually also helps them understand the kind of fundamental assumptions that they have in any kind of view that they have. Second, and an equally important skill, is the skill of analytical writing, right? Because, and this goes hand in hand with thinking, because I mean, it's not right to think of writing and thinking as two different things. Often, it's only when we write, when we are forced to write, when we are forced to organize ideas in a particular way, that we really think rigorously, right? So every philosophy course, or here or anywhere else, would be quite writing intensive, right? And writing is something that not a lot of us are often trained in schools. I mean, we of course know to write, but to write an essay, to organize ideas in paragraphs in an analytical way, right? And that can really transform one's thinking. And I've seen students also with time appreciate that quite a bit, right? So these two very important general skills, which I think whichever domain you go to, are going to be very valuable. That competence of critical thinking and analytical or expository writing. I think these are two things which I think any liberal education is at the foundation of any liberal education. And I think philosophy as a discipline is also sort of these two skills and competence are at the heart of the discipline as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I think that would be it.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful, informative, and case study based session. And thank you, participants, for joining. And if you have any queries regarding admissions, you can very well connect with our counselors. And the series still continues, probably next week too. So look out for communications from our counselors as well as your email and WhatsApp. So happy learning. Yeah.
Thank
And
you,
wish
everybody.
you, thank you, sir. And wish you
Thank
all
you for
a
having me.
happy new year in advance. Yeah. Thank you.